Hello, everybody. I'm today here with Peter Moon on the Massage and Mind Verein podcast. And Peter is one of my favorite authors. And yeah, I think you could say he covers in his books the mysterious time and space projects. Maybe some of you have heard of the Montauk project. And today I want to talk with him especially about his adventures with his Qigong. And now I'd like to give Peter the voice and tell something about his past with Qigong and how he came into contact with it.
Okay. First, let me ask: is most of your audience Germans who speak English, or is it English in general, or is it Germanic in general?
I think it's mixed. I think there are also like English, like not native speakers, but
Euro English-speaking people.
I think the people who listen to it will be speaking English.
Well, obviously. Okay. All right. So you asked about my background in Qigong and how I got into Qigong. Well, I, of course, began writing about time travel and time travel that was being first attempted and done in conjunction with the U.S. Navy and, interestingly enough, a secret faction of German Nazi forces that were working at Montauk Point in collaboration with Montauk Point. It should be understood that Long Island had the biggest group of Nazis outside of Germany in the 1930s. And there was a collaboration with German technology and engineering and American technology and engineering in the 1930s, some of which took place at the University of Chicago. And this technology eventually evolved into something called the Philadelphia experiment and eventually evolved into something called the Montauk Project in the 70s and early 80s. And there were always Nazi paperclip scientists involved in this in one way or another. Now, I was investigating that project when I met Preston Nichols, who was involved in the project.
Short question.
Yeah.
Is there something in the official history books about this collaboration going on in the 1930s?
Very little in you have to put the pieces together. Very little. But you would find trace elements of it from people on Long Island. And of course, it is in the history books that the Nazis had the biggest amount of people on Long Island. That's in regular history. And there was a place called German Gardens in Yaphank, Long Island. This is the area that became Brookhaven Labs, or is right adjacent. German Gardens is still there. Camp Siegfried is still there. And you had to be German to live there until the 1980s. It was just too prejudicial, and then they changed it. When I used to go out there and investigate in the 90s, there were still plenty of German folks, and they kind of didn't talk too much about certain subjects. They had streets, Adolf Hitler Boulevard, streets named after Goring, after Himmler. The only street that's left is named after Schiller, a German poet. They kept that because he wasn't a Nazi. And there's a big Bavarian house out there where they still have meetings, and there was a big grass field which was used for the Nazi marching with the goose stepping. You can still see that today. But so there was a strong German faction always out there. The technology stuff is not so blatant. They don't put that stuff in books because it's secret at the highest levels of espionage and warfare. But to get back to, as I began to investigate this project, I discovered that where the experiments took place at Montauk Point, right adjacent to that were ancient pyramids. And the family name of the people who the custodians of the pyramids were the pharaohs. The pharaoh family were the Montauk Indians, Montauk Native Americans, and they claimed lineage from Egypt.
So
Now, this pharaoh idea is very key because the pharaonic, and now this does relate to Qigong, and I will explain how. Now, I was stumbling into all of this investigating.
Peter,
Now,
what's
I was
pharaonic?
pharaonic is like a pharaoh.
Yeah, true.
Pharaoh. And pharaoh, in its most simplistic terms, means house. So you'll see it like a pentagram or a pentagon. Like in I don't know what they have in German bat ball, but in American baseball, they have what's called home plate. It's shaped like a pentagon. It's home. And pharaoh means house.
Okay.
One of the most common definitions of pharaoh means house. You could call it house of the Lord or house of God, but the pharaoh in Egypt was the interface between heaven and earth. Now, the Montauk Indians, I met them through a man named Robert Cooper, who was then recognized as a tribal leader of the Montauk tribe. I told him what I was about and what I was doing. He was a town councilman in the town of East Hampton, which the Montauk town of Montauk is in the town of East Hampton. And he introduced me to Sharon Jackson, Sharon Winona Redbird, who was the shaman of the Montauk Indians. And she, in turn, eventually, it took years, introduced me to the medicine man, Artie Crippen, Red Medicine he's known as. And he's half Chinese. His father was part Montauk Indian and part Shinnecock Indian, and his mother was Chinese from Hong Kong. So he became the medicine man. He was born a medicine man. He's half Chinese. He's half Native American. And he introduced me to my Qigong teacher. So this is how I got involved through my adventures into investigating the Montauk Project, which was concerning time travel, getting involved in this legend or legacy of the pharaohs, and he introduced me. Most of my contact with the Montauk Indians has been through the shaman and the medicine man, not all of it. And I was introduced to my Qigong teacher, who is Grandmaster Roosevelt Gainey of Brooklyn, New York. Now, he teaches a tradition of Qigong that prior to his teacher was never taught publicly and not taught to men. Roosevelt Gainey's teacher was Grandmaster C.C. Ling.
Yeah.
And C.C. Ling was half Korean and half Chinese. And he learned this technique from his mother, who was Chinese. His father was Korean, and his father was not too kind to him. So physically abusive. So his mother taught him, C.C. Ling, how to defend himself, and she taught him this technique of Taoist Bagua Qigong, which was never taught to men. And while the woman, the wife, could have easily beaten up her husband, she didn't do that. She taught her husband or her son to take care of himself, and he became a great teacher.
One question: Isn't
Yes.
there like different styles of bagua?
Yes. Yes, there are, and on a, like say Taoism has over 3,400 schools of Tao.
Okay.
So Qigong is not going to be much different. You have different interpretations of it, but this particular tradition was not taught. And that's what I've been learning. And one of the reasons it's not been taught is because we've lived in a great age of secrets and secrecy. Another reason it has not been taught is because human nature being what it will is that the Chinese patriarchal tradition did not teach the secrets. The schools that held the secrets would teach it incorrectly only would it be taught by family. And the reason they teach it incorrectly is because you would become powerful and possibly overpower that family. So they will almost uniformly teach something called the tuck, where you tuck in your pelvis, you tuck it in.
Yeah.
Now, this is universally taught. I've seen videos with somebody who looks very Chinese teaching the tuck, and this is how you bring qi into your body, he says. And if you actually demonstrate the tuck and you have somebody in front of you, you can push them over so easily it's not funny if they do the tuck.
It's like a dog putting his tail between his legs.
A little bit, a little bit, yes. So if you extend outwards and you reverse that tuck, you will be much, and say, take the point that's opposite your belly button in the back and extend that back, you're much stronger.
Okay.
And you're not going to be pushed over. Now, when your body is strong, your mind is strong and your spirit is strong. But I'm just saying this to give an example of how Qigong can be taught so incorrectly, universally. Now, the reason, as I told you, the reason that CC Ling learned this from his mother, he was half Korean and half Chinese. Because he was what is called a half-breed, he was embraced by neither the Chinese nor the Koreans. The Koreans are not popular in the Asian community with some of the other Asian factions. So just like the Irish were not so popular with in America. But in any case, he got his revenge, he would say, by teaching a man who was black, Roosevelt Gainey. He is of, I guess what you call melanated, meaning he has dark skin. And he grew up in primarily in Brooklyn, New York, in a very rough neighborhood, where he learned martial arts at a very young age. He was a fourth degree black belt, practiced Kempo karate, Shotokan karate, and he was a kickboxing champion. And he met this little man who was barely 5 feet tall, who could turn him upside down and have his way with him. So he studied with him, first with 6 years, and then for another 6 years, and studied and completely left behind all he learned in his very advanced, he was a very advanced martial artist, but he left behind all of that to study Bagua Qigong, because he found out that for all of the, sort of tough guy martial arts he had learned, he could not overcome his teacher. Now, while I'm speaking this from a very, I guess, martial reference point, Qigong, its main benefit is healing. And I would stress that the best way to engage in the martial arts, the combative martial arts, is not to combat at all, is to avoid confrontation, avoid physical combat. And you see many of these people they will get into their older ages and still fight, and they actually end up hurting themselves. So one of the key things in life in Taoism is preservation of life and honoring life. And one only goes into combat when one is given no other alternative. So so everything that is empowering in Qigong, and the empowerment is through the breath, primarily through the breath, is strengthening of your body, your health, and it'll have martial benefits, and it'll have health benefits. And of course, we're primarily, the average human being is primarily looking for health benefits, especially when we live in a culture where we have so much technological weapons that these things are not so easy to combat, like as a human fighting machine.
Yes, and you mentioned the healing aspect, and as I get it from the website from Roosevelt, he has also some energy facilitators.
Yes, energy facilitation. Energy facilitation is a very, very powerful technique. And energy facilitation, the primary way to facilitate somebody's energy is as you breathe to raise your hands. I don't know if they have an example of it on the website yet. And then
I don't think so.
And then exhale and bring the hands down slowly around the person. And you can calm the person down because everything, like the whole acupuncture system of the human body, which I just saw on Facebook, somebody said it's been scientifically verified, which means absolutely nothing to me because this stuff has been known about, used, and facilitated for thousands of years. So the fact that Western scientists have come to recognize it is rather unimpressive to me. But the fact is, it does exist and it does work. But the entire meridian system of the body and the 8 regulatory channels are all flows of energy. And this is energy, but it's all based upon energy. So when you begin to facilitate the energy of the human being, those meridians and regulatory channels will begin to flow. And this is what you want with energy facilitation.
And you say the basic approach is you go like someone is lying on the back and you're standing next to him and then you raise your hand and inhale?
Well, ideally you'd have somebody in a chair and you'd be behind them, and you would have your hands in front of you with your palms facing behind you and the back of your hand facing in the front. And you would, as you breathe in, you would lift up the hands until the palms are facing the person in front of you, and you would slowly exhale and release your breath slowly. And you would do that from behind the person. You would move to the left at a certain degree, probably about 37 degrees, and then move again to about 42 degrees to the left. And then you would go in back of the person again and go, to the right, the same thing to the right, then flip it around, do it from the front. And you do this each time you'd pass him, you'd do 3 passes each time, three of those
rounds,
movements, 3 of those movements, and then you increase it to 4 movements, do the whole circle, the whole body, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and even more. You want to do it at least up to 8, and sometimes you're in a position where you really can't go all around the person. They might be in a hospital bed or something, and you just have to do the best you can. This stuff is very empowering to have it done to you, but it actually empowers the facilitator more than it does the person being facilitated. So this stuff is very powerful. It's all around the breath. And that's one basic first level of energy facilitation.
Okay, just that I understand it right, it's like you're hugging the person, you're bringing the arms around the person.
You're not touching the person at all. We have to get a video of this. I'm going to be doing Qigong videos at some point.
Oh, no.
I don't know what's available on his website. I think it's going to be, if it's not. But this is, I appreciate your, this stuff is very simple to show. It's more complicated to talk about.
Okay. Okay, then maybe we should speak about the breath.
The breath is the most important aspect of Qigong, and Qigong means breath work. Now, you'll also see in Chinese literature, and not incorrectly, that Qigong is bone marrow washing. Well, yes, breathing and bone marrow washing go hand in hand. But when we say breath in Qigong, we don't mean just breath. Breath equates to life, breath equates to spirit. So when we say breath work, Qigong being work, breath work, we're saying spirit work, and we're also saying life work. So the breath, long, slow inhalations through the nose, long, slow exhalations through the mouth. And this alone is very powerful without using any of the postures, is powerful in and of itself. And we are taught to breathe like that 100 times a day, long, slow, while we're doing whatever we're doing during the day, whether we're typing, whether we're driving, whether we're walking, whether we're shopping. You do this 100 times a day, 3 times a day, to get long, slow breaths to where your breathing increases. And eventually you want to get to the point where you're doing it 8 hours a day. And if you can get 8 hours a day, you're in very good shape, because that's what's called the natural mode of being a human being. And this, according to history that my teacher studied, this was what human beings used to breathe like in centuries ago, more probably thousands of years ago. They would breathe with full lung capacity. And once you fill the lungs, you then, the lungs have 5 lobes, and most people are breathing about 5% of their lung capacity. And with Qigong, you want to fill up all 5 lobes, so you're breathing at maximum capacity. But once you surpass those lungs, when you start filling the lung capacity, you'll start going into what are called the chambers of the body. The chambers of the body you're not going to find them in an anatomical diagram. They are more, they're outside the bounds of what normal anatomy would recognize. And they are somewhat, I guess, vague from a Western understanding of science. But the chambers are nevertheless real. And when you fill those chambers of the body, you will then actually begin to breathe outside of your body. The breath process will extend outside of the body to where you will be accessing what are called the vital vapors.
And does this happen like automatically, or is it happening when you fill up your lungs completely, or do you visualize something?
Well, it'll happen, and like every once in a while, I haven't even thought about this aspect of Qigong in a while. There were times when I focused on it a lot, but there were times when you will feel what's that? Was that a chamber of the body? Good. I go ask my teacher. Yep, you hit a chamber. It's not something that I've even been thinking about too much, but this is the general thesis of Qigong and how it works. And because there is a level beyond the physical. And the first place anybody starts in Qigong is the physical level, but it bridges into different reference frames. It will go from the physical to the emotional or perceptual. Emotion and perceptual is the level beyond the physical, and that coincides with what is called the fluidic body. So like you could feel your body right now, and you could feel that it's all physical. You could feel the physical aspects. And then you can just imagine as you breathe the fluidic body, which is your body's basically fluids. And you can feel those fluids without, the flow of the fluids, the rhythm of the fluids. You can feel them and you can think about that. You can concentrate that. And all of a sudden you're into your perceptual awareness. You've gone from the physical to the perceptual. And beyond that is the mental plane. And beyond that is the spiritual aspect, etheric aspect, it's also called, or this is where you hit up with the vital vapors. But these things are where one wants to begin is with the physical, because this is where most people are, and everybody can benefit from so many different techniques and aspects. But the first thing I would tell anybody, particularly when we're doing an audio broadcast, is try breathing slowly in through the nose, out through the mouth, 100 times a day, and doing that 3 times a day. It takes mental discipline, it takes physical discipline, it takes emotional discipline. And a big deal when you're dealing with Qigong is to deal with your emotions. And some people can say, "Oh, I want to learn this. I want to learn it. I'm going to try real hard," and they go into this sort of like frenetic, zealous effort band, and that's not good either. That's good that they're trying, but sometimes you just have to do it, and with the doing, you become adept at it in different ways, different levels. Everybody studies at a different level.
And then when you say now it's also about the emotional side, and you also mentioned the darkroom exercise to balance, I don't know, difficult emotions out, or?
I will explain that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, the darkroom, which is featured in, I think, 2 of my books, but I wrote very specific exercises in my latest book called The White Bat, The Alchemy of Writing.
Yeah, with the steps.
This book gives very specific steps, Qigong exercises, which are very helpful. If you just wanted to get that book and do the Qigong exercises in it without reading the rest of it, it would benefit you greatly. Reading the rest of it would benefit you even more, because the book has a lot to do with synchronizing the 2 sides of the brain and how people think. That's part of what alchemy is, synthesizing the 2 sides of the brain. But the darkroom exercise is an exercise where one goes into complete darkness for 15 minutes a day, twice a day, ideally 3 times. And this exercise, the first part requires discipline to get yourself a dark room. Some people, that's the hardest part, is to find themselves a room where they can completely darken. Some people will use their bathroom. I'm fortunate that I have a pantry closet that I was able to just use as a darkroom closet. Take out the shelves and just use that for my darkroom. But my teacher has a big bedroom. He uses army blankets to cover up his window. And there's all sorts of creative ways. Some people use a bathroom. But to immerse yourself in complete darkness this is what they used to do in ancient Greece and in ancient Tibet with the cave meditation. It's to go into complete darkness, and what this will do is it will activate what are called your neuropeptides. It'll make you very aware, self-aware. And in the book, I give specific exercises to do the first week, the second week, the third week, the fourth week, the fifth week. If somebody gets to the fifth week, I tell them to contact me during the fourth week. Very few people will do these exercises, and the ones that have had rather remarkable occurrences. One example is, I have somebody doing it right now. He's in his fifth week of the dark room, and he started to say, "I feel these wings. What are these wings about?" And I explained to him that you have, in one technique in Qigong is to visualize wings between your elbow and your hip, so that when you move, and you're moving free form, if you move imagining you have wings there, you're much stronger, like over 10 times stronger than if you move around and you don't have those wings in motion.
Nice.
It makes you strong, and it's called your wings. Put your wings on. If you were to arm wrestle somebody with your wings on, you would be much stronger than if you didn't visualize your wings. And part of having wings, and there are other techniques where your DNA has basically morphogenetic access or memories to practice every living thing that's ever lived on this planet. So when Qigong is you're embracing your DNA when you do that, your primordial DNA. So this guy doing the darkness was starting to visualize that he had wings. And then I explained to him, I said, well, he said, what's this about? I said, well, there's a whole technique. So he's learning what his DNA knows, but that he does not consciously know. And this is part of what's waking up the superconsciousness. When you go from what's called the primordial mind, and I'll explain that, to the frontal lobe, and I give the exercise in the book. If you go to the center, the crown of your head, where you have say where a Jewish person would wear a yarmulke, right in the center of that yarmulke, this is why they wear it, although most of them don't know it, right in the center of that yarmulke, over the crown of the head where you would have a cowlick or a curl, only right in the center of the head is your primordial mind. And that's sort of how your mind began to form. After it would form from the navel, but it would have a relationship between the navel and the primordial mind. But you would also have the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is, if you consider right in the middle between the two eyes, which people often will think of the area above that as the third eye. The third eye is really not in the frontal part of the brain, as people sometimes think it is. But you want to go back and forth between that frontal lobe and the primordial mind, moving back there several times a day. Well, you actually do want to be moving constantly, because this will waken up your superconsciousness to where you are acting part primordial and part thinking, processing. Because as the Western races began to develop, they began to move away from the primordial, and they began to develop things like French bread and a sugary cuisine, and cuisine that was not healthy for them. And they begin to think too much. And they begin to get engaged in civilization, which, while civilization has its advantages, it also has its drawbacks. And you will find in a country like Romania, which I've had cause to go to for the last 8 years, every year, they have, the people know that they have not been spoiled by the Western McDonald's, Burger King culture, because they were busy fighting off hordes from Mongolia or whatnot. So they didn't have time to develop their frontal lobe to the degree that the French and the English had. And this explains why there are so many highly intelligent students in Romania, because they're incredibly intelligent, and they know this, that because their minds haven't been polluted with too much television and Burger King. Although it's moving in, and they're not completely ignorant. But we're talking about, when we talk about France, when we talk about America, when we talk about England, these people, and we can't exclude Germany from that, although Germany holds on to a lot of its primordial nature. But the people become degenerate in a certain sense, and this is what we see in Western culture.
Okay, one question, because you mentioned neuropeptides. If you could tell something more about them. Then also melatonin. I think it's also something in the dark room. And what I want to mention to you, what's funny for me, because I'm living in Berlin, there are many clubs, and you could call them also like sex clubs, kind of. And then there are also dark rooms. But where people...
what did you just say in Berlin? Did you say sex clubs?
Kind of. Like, where it's not like only about sex, also about music, but it's also like sex is pretty open there.
Okay, all right. Let's one thing at a time.
Yes.
Neuropeptides are basically small molecules that are of protein that enable neurons to communicate with each other. They're signaling, the body is signaling itself. And it all flows back to the brain. And it's basically getting your body to become aware of what it's doing. Now, the body's already aware of what it's doing on a sub level. There is the part of the body, the subconscious, which is self-regulatory. There's also the part that is you, and the I part. And that has a lot to do with the processor. And the person who's an individual will often in this culture spend too much time thinking about his issues. And what you want to do is you want to be a participant in what's going on in your body and what's going on in your environment, and you want to interface with it. The whole idea of the neuropeptides is to make them awake. And the ancient Tibetans would work in this direction. They would go into a cave for 3 years and wake up, come out in a different state. We're not talking about 3 years here. We're talking about 15 minutes a day. And it will have, I just gave an example of somebody who was able to pick up on something. And of course, when I explained it to him, it made him appreciate it. And it made me appreciate the dark room all the much more, because it's time honored. And cave initiation is a very ancient practice. So when you start to go into the cave, so to speak, you start connecting with your primordial self. And this is very important, because this is what we've lost touch with. This is why we live within a schizoid society that is preoccupied with destroying itself. And this is why it's important. And the more people who can connect with their primordial intelligence, the better off all of us are. So you see in society, I see a raised awareness, and people hate Monsanto. And you hear of the woes of Monsanto. And I just happened to see a stock market report this morning that Monsanto stock had gone up 10 points. I said, oh my, I wonder what that was about. I don't know what that was about. They've been taking it on the chin. All of a sudden they had a rebound. So as much as we make progress, there's always the opposite side of the coin, and vice versa. So what did you want me to talk about? That's the neuropeptides.
Melatonin.
What did you want me to talk about next?
Melatonin.
Melatonin. Melatonin is a... are you asking me about melatonin or melanin?
The one that's like regulating your inner clock and setting you to sleep and...
Well, okay. That's the melanin, because I've also written about melanin. Melatonin rather, is basically does what you said. It's a hormone. And it anticipates darkness.
It's like it's coming before darkness or when you're in darkness. Because what I also want to make clear and show people, because what's important about the darkroom, that there's no crack of light coming in and it's not touching your
You don't want any crack of light coming in.
And because many people don't have this condition to any time at their life, that there's no crack of light in their sleeping room.
Well, yes, that's the way they would torture people, is to leave the light on all the time. And it will help you sleep, and it will help you relax. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful, gets you in touch with your, what's called your circadian rhythm. This is your regulation of day and night cycles. So it's very important in Qigong. It's very important to wake up in the morning with the sun and to go to bed at night. This is not to stay up late at night. And as you were talking about sex clubs, a lot of those will be late at night when people should really be in bed for health reasons. So melatonin is a very important substance with regard to dark, and you're gonna balance the amount of melatonin you have with the dark room. It's going to settle your whole mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. It's going to create a foundation for it. And the more you do it, the more you bring about harmony between the body, mind, and spirit. This is where we want to go. And when you bring up the subject of sex clubs, you mentioned this, and I think from my limited experience in Germany and in Europe, the Europeans are probably much more frank about saying a term like sex clubs. While we may have them in the United States, they're kind of like not really talked about, and they're probably not the same. They're not places that I frequent, so I cannot speak with a pragmatic experience in them. But this very much ties into the idea of harmony. When you want to have, and human sexuality, harmony of mind, body, spirit. Right now, we have I guess what you call a conundrum in our culture. And a lot of it gets featured in the United States. It's the LGBT or the, gay, lesbian, transgender phenomena or culture. Now, what you have is those people are often struggling to find themselves and how they fit in the sexual scheme of things, how their sexuality relates to their body, mind, spirit. Then you have other people who just can't deal with this idea. They want to, first punish them, condemn them, and now we have this issue in the United States about who can use a bathroom.
Uh-huh.
And I've had occasion to lecture frequently at the Gay Lesbian Center in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, because I don't live far away. And I have friends that they have the Disclosure Project. So I've often been asked to speak there, and I'm friendly with those guys, and I'll always go speak for them.
The famous one, like this Disclosure Project.
Well, it's a part of that disclosure. I mean, they've got satellites all over them, and I just happen to be friends with the ones in New York. I'm not a part of the Disclosure Project. So I've spoken for them often, and I've always said that, no, if I have someday where I command huge speaking fees, I'll still go speak to them, and they're 15 or 20 people. It's just for nothing. Just because, I've done it for a long time. They're my friends. So, but anyway, I've had occasion to go there, and they have bathroom. You go in a bathroom, it's a male, female, and then one says no gender. And you go in the no gender bathroom, and it's kind of like, it gives you a different feeling. Now, if I was a woman, I might be more shy. I'm just going in there to urinate, and I don't really care who's in there, I don't know what the person in the next stall looks like, thinks like, acts like. I don't really care. It's not my business. But it gives you a totally different, it's like walking into a different state of consciousness.
Yeah.
I'm not there to have my psychology or sexuality or anything like that challenged. They're not going to be able to challenge it anyway. But when I go in there, it's like all of a sudden, I'm not in the men's room. Ooh, I'm not in the girls' room. And I would say, when I was in Scientology on the ship Apollo, we had on that ship one bathroom that was a coeducational bathroom. All the other bathrooms were women or men. They call them heads on a ship. Well, this particular one was situated between the galley and the engine room, that the culture of where people lived, it had to be shared by the females and the males. And it had its own etiquette. And I never remember any problems in that bathroom because it necessitated female male harmony between the two sexes that didn't cross the line in any appropriate way. But if you went into the girls' bathroom in the back of the ship, you'd be in big trouble. So this is what I'm saying is, I didn't feel this in the gay lesbian center. It was like there was a different weird space because there was this like sort of not no man's land, but no gender land. But to get, you were talking about, and all of this gay lesbian stuff, transgender stuff relates exactly to what you were asking about. You were asking about the sex clubs, but what were you asking about the sex clubs specifically?
I think how I came to this idea because when I prepared for the interview and read again about the dark room, that what came to my mind also was like, these dark rooms and the sex clubs. And then I also connected it because to homosexual magic, because you were also writing about homosexual magic in some book. So I made this connection in my mind and thought maybe you can.
It's a new question, but it's not, this territory is not unfamiliar to me in terms of my research. And I don't mind you asking about it because I guess what I would say is what one wants in a body, mind, spirit relationship is harmony. Harmony. Now, harmony will include a balance of yin and yang. Okay? Yin and yang. And
Yes.
people, like the most notable case we have of gender bending, if you will, is this character, the Olympic champion, Bruce Jenner, who's now Caitlyn Jenner. And this person is obviously sort of maxed out as a man, being the decathlon champion, which is one of the most impressive athletic feats that one can accomplish in athletics, is to do all these 10 events and to win them. And then, if you go back and watch him, you can see that he's got a feminine bent in him. You go back and listen, and when you're looking at him, I never really paid too much attention to the Olympics. But when I go back and look at the thing, you can see this kind of feminine streak in him when he talks. Even though he was a great physical athlete, he had this, which you expect, the physical athletes to be kind of macho or something. You see that he wasn't exactly that way. And so now he's on this quest to figure himself out. And the media really sucks it up and spits it out, and it creeps some people out, it irritates some people, but it does tend to get ratings and press. And it brings up this issue of, I guess, what you would call balance. And that really becomes the issue. And if some people are trying to find balance, and you can't speak for another person and what they've been through. I think a lot of people have issues to where they're what we call their anima or their animus, their anima being their female component, the animus being the male component, where it is squished at a very early age or not allowed to express itself. So there is what's called a undercompensation and an overcompensation. So people are dealing with issues of compensation, push, pull. And the brain is like firing this way and that way. And these are struggles because in any situation, you want the animus and the anima to be balanced. And see, one can criticize people in such circumstances, but they are only human beings, and all of human beings are so subject to criticism that if one is gay per se, or somewhere in between, and one is not gay, they're all struggling with issues of balance. So this becomes the question, and people will make up their own minds, and the purpose is to strengthen the body, mind, spirit, to create harmony between the body, mind, spirit. Now, when we get back to the whole idea of the sex club, where one might go in, I mean, a complete darkness where people are just walking through mystery voices and mystery touches, and maybe everybody's naked and they're like, woo, 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 woo. You know, it's like, I mean, this is the chaos of darkness, and they might find that their interactions with these people in darkness is completely different than if it was in the daylight.
Yeah.
And I suppose some people will, well, you know, anybody's going to find it an interesting experience. I suppose they do these things, but the point of it is when people get into these scenarios with the sex club, they're obviously seeking out balance in some form, and it may not be the best way to do it. It may not be the best way to do it, but who can speak for an individual? What you want to get is the brain talking to the body, and if you study Taoism, it will encourage you to not go to extremes, to look for the balance in the middle. It might, you know, it will lead to the middle way, the middle path, and it will teach you not to go to extremes. So these things, everything, and it's not just sex clubs, but it also applies to war. It applies to extreme activities of people. You're trying to find balance, and if one can seek balance, one is going to have a happier life. Now, you also mentioned homosexual magic, and homosexual magic is sort of what the foundation, and we're talking about male homosexual magic, is sort of the foundation, magical foundation of our Western culture. And I would say it applies to the Eastern culture. It applies to the patriarchal culture. So Aleister Crowley was a magician who was said that the highest degree of magic in his system was the 11th degree. And this is really designed as a reversal or perversion of what he would call the 9th degree. And the 9th degree was the progenerating of a virgin birth, a magical birth that would be done without the insertion
Like
of semen from a male.
Jesus.
So we have a patriarchal culture which is strangling the planet, and it's created mores which are antipathetic to what we call the goddess or life. You have an imbalance. Here you have an imbalance where you have hidden, most of your politicians are male, and many, if not most, are involved with pedophilia, as we've seen this turning up in the Daily Mail in the UK. We just had an arrest of a US congressman, and we can only assume that this is the tip of the iceberg, where you have these hidden zones of power with hidden zones of sex. And here's where your sex clubs go awry, because so many of these people will be brought into this culture, this sex culture to get them photographed and so that they can be blackmailed and controlled. And I will tell you this, that when I first wrote the book, The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time with Preston Nichols, we were interviewed by this very unusual gentleman who I came to know somewhat. He was involved, he was a lawyer for the mob on Long Island, and he was a character. He was a funny character, but he wanted to get the rights to the Montauk Project movie. And the first thing he did was invite us to a sex farm in Virginia. Now, we did not go to the sex farm in Virginia, but we were not interested in going to the sex farm. And he says, "Oh yeah, yeah. Is this a contract negotiation or is it?" It was an attempt to unduly influence us, and to me, it was just too bizarre and too weird. And this guy loved to talk about, weird sexual exploits and stuff. And he was quite funny and quite humorous. He also knew quite a lot about the secret military-industrial complex. But anyway, so yeah, this is one of the things that's been, and it's all secret. And I would also add here that I had met a very animated, very nice young, I won't say he was young, but he was a black gay person who introduced me, and this is in the Greenwich Village. He told me about the Velvet Mafia. Now, I've seen on people saying that, the Velvet Mafia is a dirty word. We can't use it anymore, and you shouldn't say it. There's no such thing as the Velvet Mafia. Well, I'm being told about the Velvet Mafia by a gay person. Velvet, of course, refers to a color that the gay culture has adopted. But the Velvet Mafia, he said, basically was the whole J. Edgar Hoover, Roy Cohn mob of what he called self-hating homosexuals, people that were homosexual that hated the fact that they hated themselves and would punish other homosexuals. He said most of the crimes being done against homosexuals were by homosexuals who hated themselves for being homosexual. So they would punish in others. And this was part of your J. Edgar Hoover culture, your Roy Cohn culture. Roy Cohn was one of the most powerful attorneys who was involved in the McCarthy hearings. That's where he got his fame. And so you had inside of the government a punitive gay culture that was basically seeking out to punish other gays. This was an acts of self-hatred. And you will find books on the Velvet Mafia, which has become a dirty word. The point being is that if you have a culture that's being, I guess, unduly influenced by this sort of mindset, a punishing culture, well, this is what we have on Earth, where the Earth has become self-hating to a large extent, to the degree that we have forces such as chemtrails, such as Monsanto, that are actively killing off life on this planet and not seeking to help the life that is trying to live on this planet. So you have to look at the gay culture through this lens. Certainly that is one faction of it, as was taught to me by a gay person.
Okay. One question. You have more time than the 1 hour we scheduled?
We've done an hour. We can keep talking if you like.
Yeah. Okay. But I think you also mentioned like positive homosexual magic.
Well, I am not an advocate of that stuff. I'm not an advocate of that. What I would tell you is that, and look, it's interesting. When you get into the culture of voodoo, they have what they call negative magic, positive magic, positive negative magic, and negative positive magic. And in other words, negative positive is where you're using both negative and positive, but the negative is you're using more negative than positive. And you have positive negative where you're using more positive than negative. And you have negative negative, and then positive positive. And I met a voodoo priest who said he used negative negative because he says in algebra, negative negative makes a positive. That was his idea. So whether that's true or not, you can have all sorts of this, but the homosexual magic that was used in the Montauk Project, and it's hard to imagine anything positive coming out of that project. The only positive thing I can imagine coming out of that project was that it gave me a platform to become a writer and to understand and expose certain things, and to understand the eventually learn the basics of time travel, which I put in this recent video series, Time Travel Theory Explained. But the Montauk Project itself was using a form of Reichian therapy, which when I say Reichian therapy, I'm talking about Wilhelm Reich.
Yes.
Wilhelm Reich was somebody who used orgone therapy, where he would deeply probe into the, what did he call it, the armor of the human body, and the armor of the human body. So people would react, somebody might respond to a threat, a verbal comment with a particular part of their body or musculature. And Reich could figure this out and, massage it out so where they're responding with a not a reaction sort of response. So there was Preston Nichols was very much involved in this therapy, and as were the practitioners at Montauk. It was developed in association with the research of Dr. Joseph Mengele and the twin experiments, whereby they were using the orgone therapy to put people into trance and awaken them into a consciousness that was outside of their normal consciousness, whereby characters could have these aspects of their mind amplified. They could use it to influence moods, emotions, and eventually to control matter, to change matter, and eventually to change time. These capabilities do exist. So it gets very dicey here, because technically you wouldn't call it homosexual magic. You would call it putting somebody into a orgone trance.
But can you explain more about the orgone trance? Does it have to do something with the accumulator, or is it just like
No,
breaking down the armor, but not in a soft way?
it's not tied to the idea of an orgone accumulator, which is a physical box that people would go in. I mean, one might complement the other, but the orgone trance is basically siphoning off somebody's sexuality and putting them into a state where they are now not in their normal consciousness, and they are able to read data. And here it all gets very dicey, because you can, it's like a hypnotic trance is what it is. It's a mesmeric trance where somebody's animal magnetism has been manipulated or influenced to put them into a state where they can access parts of their mind, call it psychic perception if you want, that they wouldn't normally be able to do. Now, part of the research at Montauk included torturing people to put them in such a state. So you have a sadistic culture at Montauk that was also using this magic, which we can call Reiki and magic, and Crowley used this type of magic too. Now, so to say that it's positive is very questionable, but to say that it is something that was done to manipulate, to discover, and much of it was always done to find information. It's like, find information, get me information. And I always know that the criterion of healing that when I was in Scientology, that we used in Scientology, was never going for information. It was, does his emotional tone get better? Does it raise? Does it make him better? Does it make him feel better? Is he becoming less burdened emotionally? And there was a whole way of, and the Montauk therapy, now, it didn't do that. It was often going for information. It was exploitive. So I'm reluctant to call that particular avenue positive.
I'm glad that you're also mentioning Scientology and the benefits from it, because people might, when they hear the word Scientology, get super triggered. But it's also important to stress that it has been like something very good before it got corrupted.
Well, it's of course an interesting question, I suppose, and it's a triggerable question. And I wrote a book called The Montauk Book of the Dead, which, after I'd written all these books about investigating the Montauk Project, I was influenced, if not forced, by the circumstances which help one make up one's mind, that I should write this book to explain to my audience how I got involved in researching Montauk. And I would not have been able to do it had it not been for my experiences with Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. And one of the things I discuss in that book, The Montauk Book of the Dead, is the idea of trigger. What is it that triggers people? Like when I got into Scientology, and it was, for me, it was always a positive reference frame, but there was always this trigger stuff. Like, what makes people go crazy? What make people go mad? Now, we're not talking about stark raving mad here. What is it that triggers people? And I was interested. Well, I began to study a lot in high school because I had moved to a new high school and I didn't have the social network that I had before. So I ended up studying and reading in science fiction, and then it led to deeper questionings of things, and I began to see that all the literature on witchcraft in particular was highly prejudicial. In other words, it was dismissive and prejudicial, and then some. The people that wrote about it lacked any objectivity. And I said, this is interesting. So then I began looking into things further, and I began to see the prejudicial nature of human behavior. Now, this was juxtaposed at a time when there was the Vietnam War, the hippies were all over the place in California where I grew up, and there was a questioning of the government, of the military-industrial complex, the war. So there was a lot of questioning of things in general and what makes people trigger. Like, why did all these white people hate black people? Why did the Black Panthers have to take over the Capitol building in Sacramento to get any modicum of justice or acknowledgement? And there was this stuff going on, so you saw this crazy reactionary thing. Now, when you got to the subject of Scientology, it was dealing with the mind. And I studied it because I wanted to find out all those hidden avenues of the mind that I knew existed that were virtually inaccessible by normal life. So that's why I began to investigate it. I wanted to find out what else was in my mind. And this offered a pathway. But one of the things is, you would find that people could get very triggered on some of the ideas in Scientology. And I would have situations where people would want to talk to me. I was the type of person that I want to be left on my own. I'm studying this. I didn't want to talk about it, but my parents would force me to talk about it. My friends would be predisposed to want me to talk about it. And I didn't want to talk about it. It was my decisions. So they would often bring up the issues. And quite often it would upset them, what I was talking about. And it wasn't so much the idea of being involved with a cult or a group. It was when you're actually bringing up the issues, people would get upset because they're talking about this idea that their mind can be controlled, has been controlled. And the whole theory of Scientology was not that Scientology was there to control your mind. Now, it could have influenced your life to the point where it was a virtual control over your life. But the interesting thing is the whole premise of it was that your mind had been controlled and in the past, and that you were living a life that was a controlled life, a prescribed life. Now, it might not have said that in those specific words, but it said so in many words, that when I grew up, you were, I guess, status quo was you grew up, you went to college, and you got a job, and you shut your mouth. And that's what it was, and you had a family or whatnot. And this was not enough for many of us. Many people did follow that pattern, even though they questioned it. They eventually got a job, liked Ronald Reagan, had kids, and I was young once. They might say I was young once. So the revolution did not last, but a dim memory. But the whole point, the idea that you are triggered, that you grow up in a society where you are conditioned to not question. And then when you begin to question, you will be punished for that questioning, or furthermore, pain will accrue to you. Now, that's because you're fighting up again. This is the way you condition somebody. So L. Ron Hubbard believed that life was on this planet was a series of implants that were forcibly done to people in lifetime after lifetime, so that when you would die, you would report to the implant station and to make sure that you hadn't begun to remember. And then you would go back into a body and be a good citizen and not going past the boundaries. Now, whether that is true or not is something that individuals can agree with, disagree with, or debate. The point of it is that when you begin to bring up this proposition that people could be in a controlled environment that they are not free to question, can be very upsetting, or as you say, triggering. So because Dianetics and Scientology was dealing and addressing the trigger zone of control, and the fact that control is exercised by invisible forces that exercise themselves as mores of the culture, this is the issue. Now, because Scientology as an organization superimposed itself as the solution to this control, of course, it would make it a triggerable target. Now, the fact is that Scientology, as it evolved through the years, became what it was trying or purporting to solve. And this all goes back to the idea that what heals the human mind can destroy the human mind. It goes both ways. It's so this is why. So we're really, to make it as basic and simplistic, we're dealing with the idea of what is it that triggers, what is it that makes people go crazy or disgruntled. Now, you could have a citizen who is just, his purpose in life is to go be a shoemaker, and he's going to make shoes for everybody and make people happy with the shoes, and that's fine. Some people live lives that are very simplistic that way, and they serve a purpose to the morphogenetic grid as far as humanity is concerned. They may come in and be a doctor. They may come in and bring aviation to the world. They may do these things. There's all sorts of different people in the world. And then there are some people who are there to do agendas which are not so helpful and purposeful. And then we find ourselves somewhere in this big zoo of a life, and we have to figure out what we're going to do and whether we're going to question authority or be ourselves. And some of us have to question that in order to find out who and what we are.
Okay. Wow. I would switch back one more time to Qigong.
Right.
Maybe you want to talk maybe about the 4 pillars of Qigong? I don't know if, like, he's describing them on his website as 4 pillars, like standing, walking in circles, joint manipulation.
Those, sure. Those are very, very important things. Joint manipulation is, well, maybe I'll start with standing. Standing, and it's hard to show you how to stand without a video, but to stand with your chin up, ears back, your hands in front of you as if you were holding up a beach ball.
Mm-hmm.
Your pelvis sinking into the ground, but tilted
to the forefront.
Tilt the pelvis forwards, and with the lower part gently pressing down into the earth, and then your knees slightly bent, your toes slightly pointed inward, and this is a stance.
And where's the weight of the, like, how's the weight distributed on the feet?
Well, the distribution of the weight would be 70-30. It's like 70 towards the front, 70% of your weight towards the front, 30 towards the weight, 30 towards the back. And what actually is, you're lifting that, the heel's kind of lifting off the ground, and the back of your knee is pressing it. Your slightly bent knee, the back of the knee is pressing it down. So this is a stance of equilibrium. And equilibrium, and you're putting your body into a natural equilibrium, and you're going to maintain this stance. When you maintain this stance properly, you will eventually flow into it properly, and you will get all these neuropeptides activated. And it strengthens your tendons, it strengthens your bones, it strengthens your ligaments, and it's one of the most beautiful exercises that you can do. The great masters will do nothing but stand, and they will do their whole workout standing. And it may not look like they're doing anything, but indeed they are. So standing is a very, and then this is just one posture I mentioned. It's a very basic posture. So I went into that posture. I was told to do it for 20 minutes a day for 100 days. And when you do it for 100 days, it'll kind of burn it, hardwire it into your body. And he said, you'll have a decent foundation. Not a good foundation, but a decent foundation for Qigong. So I started out to do it, and it was very difficult. It became so difficult that I almost quit. And then one day in the park where we studied, I just started doing it, and I started to get it. I started to feel it. And while I started to feel it, not all of them, but a great deal of the students started coming over around me and doing it, like as if they were following me. And this was very odd because it was a part of the class where, everybody would just do free form, whatever they wanted to do. And all these people started coming around me and doing it. And I noticed that I created this energy, and And finally I go, wow. And my hands were burning. And I looked at my watch and it said 17 minutes. I'd done it for 17 minutes. If I did it for 17 minutes, I knew I could do it for 20 minutes. And I had to be shown how to shake my hands out because I had too much Qi. But they said, well, you got it now. And then I went over and told the teacher who was in another part of the park, and he was so happy that it's like, wow, somebody got what I'm saying. And then I found out on that same day that I could have been doing it in 5-minute increments. I could have been doing 5 minutes a day times 4 to get my 20 minutes in, but nobody told me that. So I was doing it 20 minutes in one fell swoop, and that's how I did it. I did it 20 minutes for one day, then I go on to another stance for 100 days. And this completely changes your anatomy because you start telling the body what you're doing to it rather than it telling you. So you begin to speak to your body and you begin to control your body and influence the body. So standing was a very foundational way that I learned Qigong. And it's something that I do every day. And it's a great thing. Now that's standing.
And can you also say something, because I think he mentions on his website that you do the vital breath and something about the Qi belt?
Okay. The vital breath is if you can breathe and you focus on your navel. You focus on your navel and as you breathe, you're going to push that navel outward, but you're not going to push it outward so that your belly's sticking out like a Buddha belly. And this is sort of what the Buddha belly symbolizes, but the Buddha belly this is called the Buddha breath. And it's like you're extending the navel, you're pushing the navel outward, but you're not booming it out like a big fat Buddha belly. You're just pushing the navel out slowly. And then when you exhale, you draw the navel in. I mean, we're talking a fraction, quarter, half, or half an inch. And when you do that, you're exercising what is called the pre-birth breath, because it was your navel where you took in sustenance from your mother for the umbilical cord. It's called the pre-birth breath. And that is the vital breath. So every breath should be with the awareness of the navel, because you will take in much more oxygen. So when you're doing those 100 breaths I was talking about, you want to do that. So that's the vital breath. When did you want to ask me the next thing?
Qi belt.
Qi belt, okay. Now the Qi belt is very important. It's a foundational function and activation of Qigong. And sometimes it's hard for people to grasp it. It's very easy to show it. If you lift your anus and draw in your navel, you will feel a tightening around your groin. And this is the easiest way I can explain. And you breathe in. Now, if you have lifted that navel and are lifting it, lifting the anus towards the navel, you've basically activated your Qi belt. And if you're in that condition, with that tightened condition, and you try and have a person move you around, like we'll do this in class, you'll put a girl, maybe a petite girl, and two big guys holding each one of her arms, and they say, okay, get up out of that chair and walk. And she'll walk and she'll push these guys around if her Qi belt's on. When she takes her Qi belt off, she'll be like marshmallow to them. So this is how powerful the Qi belt is. Again, if you put the Qi belt on and you arm wrestle somebody, you'll be much stronger than if you don't put the Qi belt. So this is immediate demonstration of power. And the Qi belt will be ideally on, but there are so many different levels to the Qi belt. There's so many different exercises to do to strengthen it and to make it more powerful, but this is a way of empowering yourself and making yourself healthier.
I have a question regarding this because it's about contracting the muscles, and what I learned also from the website that you often want to let that you secure a good energy flow, you want to let all the muscles be as loose as possible. And what I also get from other techniques I played around with, that's like working towards to relax your anus. So it's not like tied up because
Well, you're lifting your anus. You're
yeah,
lifting your anus, and yeah, it doesn't. It's not like you're in some. Yeah, you want to be relaxed as much as possible, but you're lifting it. So when you put on the chi belt, it's easy to describe it as tightening it, and you are tightening it, but you're like, say for example, if you see a weightlifter, and a weightlifter will put these belts on before he'll lift all these big pounds,
yeah.
he's sort of cheating with regards to his chi belt. He's doing that to strengthen that area of the body and to tighten it. But the the lifting of the anus and the drawing in of the navel is really what you want to be doing. But you will feel other parts of your body tighten. But now with regards to relaxation, yes, you want to be relaxed. There's something, and this is not mentioned in the four pillars here, but it's called the song. The song is the correct ratio between tension and relaxation in the body. Now, the first way you get some idea of the song is to stand against a wall for 30 minutes a day. And I've done this for 6 months. I've done it for 6 months, and then I came back and did it for another 6 months. And this is an incredible exercise because when you're standing against a wall, it's not just standing against a wall. You're pressing the small of your back to the wall. So it's not good enough that you're standing against a wall. You got your head up against the wall, you're standing erect, and then you're slowly gonna move it's called the Ming Ming point. It's opposite the navel. You're gonna put that part back against the wall. Now, you might not be able to do it on your first session. You might not be able to do it on your second, but then gradually, after a week or two, you'll be able to put that entire back against the back of the wall. And then, like say, I've been standing for years, and then I went to do this wall exercise, and I was up against the wall. After 15 minutes, I went stir crazy. I never had anything like it, and I didn't go stir crazy doing other things. But I got through it, and I just said, okay, and I learned how to do it. And for 30 minutes a day, it wasn't always consecutive because I might get broken up, but usually it was. And this creates an incredible process in the body because what happens is it elongates your spine. Now, your spine is constantly under assault by gravity. And gravity is making your spine get smaller, crunching it down every day. When you begin to do this exercise, you're pushing gravity up. You're reversing the attrition that is caused to your body by gravity. So all of a sudden, you're doing things to your body, your posture is getting better, your health is getting better, and your ratio of relaxation to tension in the body is improving. So that's called the song, and that's something that every Qigong practitioner wants to eventually learn and master. But certainly it changes. You have whole anatomical changes. So I hope I addressed your question on that.
Okay, yes, this helps.
Now, let's go to joint manipulation. Joint manipulation is moving the body any way it wants to go, any way, shape, or form. Ideally, you want to wake up in the morning, drink a glass of water, room temperature water with a squeeze of lemon in it, This is to balance your pH. And then right in the bed, if you can, with no pillow under your head, to move your joints any way they want to go. And you want to have your chi belt on, which means you want to have your anus lifted and your navel pulled in. And you're going to move the body, and you want it to be, I mean, you don't want to be loose and floppy. You don't want to be loose and floppy. And you're going to move, and then what you're doing while you're doing this joint manipulation, you're getting all the sludge and dross out of your joints, and you're also moving your lymph. Now, joint manipulation will go, you want to get up out of the bed and you want to walk in a figure eight, a circle eight, which is not only the shape of infinity, it's going to really get your lymph flowing, because when you walk in the circle eight, the lymph is going to flow through all parts of the body, particularly those parts of the body that it's not going to flow, because the body does not have a natural pump for lymph. So this will make people much healthier. It's a tremendous asset to one's daily life. And that's joint manipulation. And you can work out any cricks, see, the arthritis is like rust in the body. When you do this stuff, you're not going to be arthritic because you're getting the joints to move. And I'm 63 years old. I started doing this when I was 55. And no, I do not have arthritic joints at all. I play American football every Sunday in the fall and the summer, and I wouldn't think of quitting. You know, it's like the old age thing is, no, I don't register with it. I wish I had more time to pursue more athletic activities, and to have more fun doing it, but time is limited.
Are you writing a book right now?
Actually, I'm writing 2 books, and I'm writing, I've switched my format to become more, I guess what you'd say, computer oriented. I have a website that is actually, I have about 3 or 4 chapters of 2 books I'm working on that are going to be released on a new website that's going to feature like more videos on the time travel series. I'll be featuring different videos, different podcasts like the one you're doing to me right now. And the website you can find out all this stuff on is digitalmontauk.com. But the books I'm working on, one is called Stardust: An Initiation into Time, which talks about understanding time. It will address how time travel relates to consciousness. It also gives the scientific math and physics of time travel. And it also will blend it with synchronicity, which is a sense of time. And you also see synchronicity in astrology being the science of synchronicity. So it blends it with this. And how the stardust, it's called Stardust because we're all related to the stars. Everything we have in this universe we're made up of stardust. The other book, and I'll be writing these simultaneously and putting up a chapter a month, more of that if I can, so that they can also access the entire history of the Montauk Pulse newsletter, which has been in print for 20 years, and it'll be subscriber month by month. And the other book is called L. Ron Hubbard, The Tao of Insanity, and it goes into some of the history of L. Ron Hubbard that's not been well understood or appreciated, but it's basically going to analyze Hubbard not so much from insanity, although that will be a topic of discussion and consideration, but from power and how it affects the individual and the empowerment of the individual.
That's cool. I'm looking forward. Okay, back to the
4 pillars. Now, we did standing and we did joint manipulation, and we will address circle walking. We did circle walking, joint manipulation, and flexing. Now, flexing is very powerful exercise and one that I'm doing every day. There are different postures in Qigong, but when you flex, there's two types of flexes, but the first flex you learn is the Wudong flex, where means you're breathing in, and as you breathe in, you flex your body. As you exhale, you unflex.
Your whole body.
Yes. And you'll be in a particular posture. Now, there's 24 postures that he's given us. And when you do 50 flexes a day, it's considered beneficial for your health. When you do 100 flexes, it's considered martial benefit. Like, okay, you're moving into the martial territory. Power, martial power. So, go ahead.
You hold the flex like for a second, or?
Well, what you actually want to do is you want to get to 80% of your breath capacity, and then you want to hold it for 1 or 2 seconds. It's called breath retention. And then exhale. And this will strengthen your body. And so I'm doing a program where he gave us these 24 flexes, where you start with 3 flexes a day, and then you do it. You start with the first flex and you do it 3 times a day, and then you do it 3 times a day, and then the next day you do it 4 times a day, and then you're doing. Let me just clarify this. You're doing 1 flex 24 times, okay, or 25 times. The next day you do the second flex 25 times, up to all 24 flexes. Then, when you've done them, like say 3 times or 1 time, then the next 24 days you do them 2 times, then 3 times, then 4 times, then 5 times. Now I am doing 24 flexes 16 times a day right now.
Okay.
And what this does is, this means I'm doing about 300 flexes in a day. Now that's 3 times what's considered martial power. Now, this does a complete emotional change in your psychological outlook, because you have to schedule your day around the flexes if you're going to do them. I've been doing them for over a year, and I won't be done with this program till December. This means that while I'm in Romania this summer, when I go to Romania, when I go to airports, I'm going to have to make special dispensation to where I can find a place to do my flexes. I might be doing them in the back of a plane and doing it in such a way that I'm not creating a scenario. But it's like, the thing is that you become so much stronger than you were before, and it's just it's really a good feeling, because you're strengthening your joints. And while you know that people of your age are typically, and even people younger than yourself are going, you see them going downhill, you're going in the opposite direction. And this is the point with Qigong. You're going to arrest the inclination, the march of death. Everybody's on a march of death from the day they wake up in the crib. They're moving towards death. Well, the idea in Taoism is to live long, because life is precious. So it's a matter of respecting life and treating life with respect, and it will give you back something. That's the whole idea. So it's an opportunity, and it's not necessarily an easy opportunity, because you have to push back energy, you have to push back power. if you have what's called the monkey mind, in all the martial arts, they refer to the monkey mind. The monkey mind is that which is going to take you off of your path. You know, if the monkey mind says, "Oh, I should have my coffee this morning," nope, not for me. I do not drink coffee. I will drink the lemon water, and I will wake up with the lemon water, and I will wake up with Qigong and moving my body, and I find out, well, it's far better than coffee. Coffee will weaken your adrenals, and but people will depend on that coffee. I was addicted to coffee at the age of 19, and that addiction did not last long. I got rid of it because I saw how dangerous it was, and that was pretty much it on coffee.
Short question. You know when exactly you're going to Romania?
I know exactly. I'm going. I'll be there, around the end of July, and then I'll be spending my quality time about the first 2 weeks of August. I'll be at the Atlanticron camp, arriving there on or about the 1st of August, and maybe the 31st of July. I'm not sure, and then we'll be at that camp for pretty much a week, and then I'll be heading up to Transylvania.
And is it still possible for people to come with you?
Well, I don't have a tour set up. We were going to do that. It was going to be an expensive tour with Andrew Bartzies, but there were some problems with some of his infrastructure as far as the video editing he needed to get things done. So hopefully we'll do that next year. But I will be at the Atlanticron camp, which people are, they can go to the Atlanticron website, spelled like it sounds, KRONALANTRY, KRON, and they can go to that if, international people might be, I don't imagine there's too many people that are going to want to go or can go, but they might be treated, because the camp will fill up. There will be so many people. International visitors might be treated with a little more, yeah, sure, you can come along. I don't know. There's not too many. So people can go to that. We'll be going up I don't even know how we're getting there. So in other words, I don't have transportation for people. I don't have, I couldn't even charge them transportation. I don't have my transportation worked out, which will probably be going up in a couple of friends' cars, depending on how many people I have with my party. And people don't always decide, like I've already got my ticket, and one of my friends has his ticket. One of my friends will have his ticket by the end of this month. But there will be other people, and then I don't know which Romanians are going to go with us. So I don't know. It's certainly possible, but things will unfold as they do towards the end, before the end.
Okay. Last thing, circle walking.
Circle walking, well, that's what I talked about going in. It's really flows right into joint manipulation, because when one is circle walking, one is doing the joint manipulation, going in the figure 8, where you can go do it around 2 chairs or two hula hoops. So that is, they are different, the circle walking and the joint manipulation, but they also, all these things complement each other. Like it'll say, circle walking is your standing in motion. All these things, you want to be doing them all at the same time, if you can imagine that. You're giving all these different exercises, but the idea is to do them all at once. Or as my teacher would say, one part moves, all parts move. So if one can master that, one has accomplished an awful lot. And what one can accomplish with this stuff is amazing. You can accomplish so much for your own individual life. You can't compare it to others. Many of the people that I study with have been in martial arts much, if not most, of their life since they were a teenager. And some of them are accomplished in different fields. And you can do these exercises and do them, and they're not doing them, and you can overpower them in a given exercise called push hands. And it could be very impressive that you could overpower them. But they have so much experience, you can't get overconfident because they'll come back and figure out what they did wrong, and they'll overpower you. And this is the way we teach each other, by learning from each other and trying to build each other up. So this stuff is very, but as they say, you can accomplish amazing things in your health, in your life, and you can improve it. And in Qigong, there's no limit as to what you can do. The only thing I would warn is to measure your enthusiasm, because you can become so powerful with this stuff that you can get carried away. And you don't want to get carried away, because then you can do something stupid. You can think you are more powerful than you are. And this is, Qigong will teach you humility. But I recommend people go to the website, bodyenergetics.tv, Roosevelt Gainey's website, the Taoist System of Living Arts. And you will find a couple videos if you look up Taoist System of Living Arts on YouTube, which are very helpful. One of my friends, Chris, is doing the exercises. And this is great stuff. So thank you for the interview.
Thank you, Peter. So I guess this was your last word.
The only thing I'll say is, that website, which is bodyenergetics.tv, my website, digitalmontauk.com. I will be having a new website or a new subscription service for more information. I will eventually get around to doing Qigong videos, which will illustrate some of these things in a Qi Gong Course.
Yes, please.
Yes. So you caught me ahead. I have to get up with doing all my individual books and getting up what I've already done, and that's sort of, I have to go in sequence, I guess, to get all this stuff up and done.
Okay. I just want to let people know that I'll put everything in the show notes, what you give me, how to reach you, and interesting stuff. And thank you a lot for the wild ride.
Okay, well, thank you for your different and interesting questions.
Okay, so take care.
Okay.
And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.